Hi everyone, it's Kimber, the study abroad specialist. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to create a recession-friendly budget for students who are getting full degrees abroad during the recession time. So I'm just going to dive right into it. I know that, as I said in a recent video, I know I've been putting out a lot more content that is recession related, and I don't want to become a recession channel. You know, this channel is all about fun and study abroad, but I do think that it is important that we talk about it. And I have gotten quite a few questions from students that I have been working with, whether it's advising or they've just contacted me through comments, asking about what I think about their plans for study abroad as we walk right into a recession and whether or not they should do it. And for me, I always like to make things that are going to be long term. So even if you are studying abroad 10 years from now and you find this video, it still may be relevant because, as I always like to say to students, you don't just want to think about what is happening right now in the moment. You want to be forward thinking in the way of just trying to decide the best way how you can save money and budget wisely. But I know that for students out there who are getting full degrees abroad, that there is a bit of a different take than my students that I work with that are just going for a semester and just for a shorter period of time. So the first tip that I want to give you, I'm going to give you several. The first one that I want to give you for thinking about ways that you can create a recession-friendly budget as you go through with your full degree abroad, assuming that you still plan to go, is that I want you to try and estimate what your expenses are going to be for a year. So this is thinking about whether you are going to get an undergrad degree, which could be 3 to 4 years abroad, or if you are going for, let's say, a master's degree, which could be 1 year or 2 years, depending on where you're going and what you're studying. But just thinking of a long-term situation, I want you to be able to factor in everything you're going to need. So you need to make an exhaustive list of not just what you currently spend while you're at home, so just thinking about what you actually spend money on now, but what you're going to need once you go abroad. So are you going to have to be responsible for your housing? Or are you going to have to renew your visa every year? I know there are some countries where you have to renew every year. It's not just for the length of your program. They ask you to renew it every year. So you could have a fee for that. You also too may have to deal with health insurance if you're going to certain countries. Maybe you're coming here to the US where you could have to invest in a car and then you have to get car insurance. There's all these different things that you have to consider. It doesn't mean that it is a final list, but these are just certain things that you may have to think about. And so I want you to go through and think about that. I know for a lot of students as well, maybe you have to factor in your tuition. You could be paying your tuition all yourself, or you could even have help from your family. But you still have to factor that in because that is definitely going to be your biggest expense that you're going to have to pay for, because that's the entire reason why you're able to be in school, is because you're paying the tuition. And of course, you have to think about the fact that for international students, tuition is usually a little bit more expensive no matter where you are traveling. So I definitely want you to be able to factor that in. And then as you go in, I want you to go ahead and rank those particular things. So we know that we have our items on our list that are non-negotiables and that are must-have. So with non-negotiables, these could be things that you absolutely have to have. So for example, you have to be able to factor in your budget for food and water and all those things you have to live. You also are going to need certain things. Potentially it could be software related, or maybe you need to get a new computer. That's going to be something that you definitely have to have in order to help you along with your studies. Maybe also too, there could be certain medications or certain things that you need to actually be able to survive. All of those things are going to be either must-haves or non-negotiables. So you definitely want to put those towards the top of your list, and then think about other things that you may need to bring with you or that you may need to purchase as soon as you arrive in your host country, that you know that you're not going to necessarily be able to go without. You definitely want to factor those in. And then as you go along, what you're going to do is just go ahead and fill out the rest of your particular budget. I did want to point out that I do have a freebie for you as well. So I have my budgeting e-guide. In the past, I used to charge for this e-guide, but I decided to make it free. I feel like it is very relevant at the moment, and it's going to be very useful to students, whether we are in a recession or not, to get access to this free e-guide. So go ahead and click into the description box to find that. So after you've gone through and actually made the list, I want you to also think about certain things as well that international students and students who are coming abroad to think about degrees often have to think about in a way that semester students don't. So for example, are you going to need to travel, or at least you want to, and I try and use need and want here, not interchangeably, but I know that if you are abroad for long periods of time, you do want to come home and visit. So you also need to think about that. Are you going to be traveling back and forth to your home country and back and forth maybe on breaks or different things like that? I would say that's a key thing to factor in that a lot of students who are just going for a semester don't need to worry about. So definitely those two things, thinking about the visa, if that has to be renewed multiple times, and also just traveling back and forth just to see family or see friends back home, is something that you wouldn't have to worry about if you were just doing for a semester or even 2 semesters. So definitely factoring that in would be the first point, is to think overall about your budget and then think about those sort of high level things that you cannot go without, or things that may not be a necessity. So it may not be a necessity to travel back and forth back home, but it may be something that may be worth it if you're going to be overseas for years at a time. So the next thing I want you to focus on for this is thinking about your financial aid. So I know that financial aid looks completely different depending on what country you're going to be going to for your degree, but typically there are 3 different levels of basic financial aid, and then different countries have different levels of financial aid for international students. So the first one obviously is scholarships, which is everyone's favorite type of financial aid because it's typically free money, and whether it is going to be a partial scholarship or a minimal scholarship or even a full ride scholarship, which is everyone's ideal, is that is great because again, it's money that you don't have to worry about. And even though there are usually some stipulation in terms of a grade point average or something that you have to maintain while you're in school, you don't have to worry about carrying on debt long term for that. So people love scholarships. So definitely go ahead and outline what you know. And again, it could just be scholarships that you get directly from the school that you're going to, or maybe you have from a private entity. So go ahead and outline what that's going to be and how long that lasts. You do also want to consider that with scholarships, a lot of times you have to reapply every year. So I want you to be very clear about what the terms of your scholarship are, and you need to know that outright. A lot of times students get involved with a scholarship and then they're like, oh, I didn't realize it was just for 1 year, and they may not be eligible to reapply. So you want to understand the full terms of that. So whatever scholarships you have, make sure that you have clearly outlined, you understand how long that funding lasts and when that funding will be available for your program. The next type of funding is going to be grants. So with grants, a lot of times it is either related directly to your course, or it could be something where maybe you apply for a grant and you have a certain amount of time that you are able to study with that particular grant. Or if it's from your school specifically, maybe they have been able to go ahead and issue the grant for the full amount of your degree program. And then afterwards, then you will just have to figure out what to do, whether you're going to be returning home to work or whatever that actually looks like. But again, similar to scholarships, you want to understand what the terms are of your grant and specifically how much you'll be receiving. When do you actually receive it? You want to understand that. Last but not least, I think everyone knows about student loans. I've talked about them on this channel before, along with other types of funding for schools. But even if you are getting student loans, you want to actually kind of go through and map out what that looks like. You want to understand what the terms are of when you will actually start to have to pay money, and is there availability for any type of forgiveness if you can't find a job right away. You're going to want to understand all those different elements, particularly if you are coming from an overseas country, because depending on where you're going and where you're coming from, student loans, maintenance loans may look a lot different. And so you want to understand what loans look like as an international student wherever you're going. So be very clear about that. Now, in terms of the actual funding, whether it is scholarship, grants, or student loans, you also want to understand when you're actually going to be getting the money. So whether it is actually coming to you, that's the first thing you want to know is it going to be issued directly to you? Typically for scholarships and grants, it is not directly issued to the students. Depending on where you get the student loan, for example, any type of federal student loans, and international students would not necessarily be eligible for this. If you looked at my video on ISFA, then you know more about how financial aid works in the US. But For some countries where you go and there are student loans available, it is issued directly to the student. I know here in the US, for students who are getting student loans who are from the US, if they are going through a private bank, sometimes it's issued directly to the student, but other times it's issued directly to the school, particularly if it's on the federal level. So you just want to understand, for whatever type of financial aid you're getting, you want to know, is the money coming directly to you or is it going to the school? How does that work? And then also too, how are they actually going to be sending it? Are they going to be sending it in a lump sum? Are they going to be sending it in installments? The reason why you need to inquire about that is because you want to understand how that matches up with what your school is expecting. There are some schools that, even if, let's say, they don't want the full fee on September 1st. Let's say your program starts on September 15th and they need the payment by September 1st. They may not want the full payment on September 1st, but they need you to be able to show that you have that payment available. And sometimes for scholarships and grants, particularly, maybe the particular guarantor, the way that they're doing it, they can only show it by semester. So you need to be very clear about that, about what the school is expecting in terms of what they want documented and what you're actually able to show. So that needs to all be cleared up before you begin with your schooling, so that there are no bad surprises. You don't want to get in a situation where you've actually gone overseas and then you get there and then you can't show the funding and then it's kind of weird. There is kind of a stopgap in there though, because typically with your visa, before you get to the point of even going, you're going to have to be able to show the money. But there are some instances where, depending on what country you're going to, maybe they don't really look at that until you're actually already there. So just being prepared and being more aware of what is going on is going to be really helpful for you. And again, that's going to help you as you go through and build your recession friendly budget, because as you start thinking about the certain elements that you're going to have to contribute towards, whether it be, again, for a car payment or for health insurance or for different things, if you have the bigger pieces like your tuition or like your housing already covered, that's really going to help you. And particularly if you're able to get financial aid help with that, that is going to be very useful as you move forward studying during a recession. So the next thing that I want you to look at as you are trying to make a recession-friendly budget for a degree program abroad is thinking about where your highest costs are. So you've already gone through and made a list of what your overall costs are, what you spend, let's say, weekly or monthly. I want you to think about where those highest costs are and to see if there are different things that you can lock in at a set rate. So it could be that maybe housing is going to be a huge cost for you. Is there a way to be able to front load that and say, maybe you are lucky enough where you can pay 6 months rent in advance? Can you do something like that? Or if you are going to a country, maybe you're coming to a country like the US where you have to pay for health insurance and maybe you're not going for another 5 months or so, but you want to go ahead and get a good deal. Could you go ahead and reach out to a health insurance company and get a package that could be in a format that is already in today's pricing as opposed to what it might be 6 months or 7 months from now? Something like that. With anything that's going to be a high expense, find a way to be able to lock it in. I know that for a lot of students, as we talked about earlier, travel is a big one. So maybe you are already thinking about, I do actually want to be able to travel home for the holidays. Well, you're going to go ahead and map that out. And even if it's a year in advance, I know that for some airlines and some other platforms, it's harder to book that far in advance, but go ahead and at least see if you can. A lot of times, if you call the airlines, you can actually book it over the phone. So maybe you are an entire year and a half in advance and you said, even if you can't actually book it right, then you can find out when they're going to release the deals. And then that way you'll at least be ahead of the game, knowing that I need to get on top of this and I can lock in the best rate possible. I think that for a lot of students, that's where it gets tricky, because obviously you're a busy student, you have a lot going on, and then you tend to get things last minute, and then it's just going to be more costly. And with all the students that I work with, I'm always trying to help them not just be able to save money, but also think about ways that they can sort of project things to make it easier on them. And that is another way that you can do that, is sort of forward forecasting and being ahead of the game on everything that is going to be expensive. And particularly with housing and travel, those are two of the main places where students just get eaten alive with their budget outside of the tuition piece. So I would definitely say do that. Same thing for anything that you're going to need to take with you that's going to be pricey. Maybe there is a particular, I always go back to this example because I know quite a few students who are in this case of a particular software that you're going to need for your laptop or whatever device that you're using. Maybe what you're going to have to do is, instead of looking forward to the most recent release, maybe you go ahead and get the one that is going to be comparable for you and that will work, and maybe you can do an update later, but you go ahead and get the one that's going to be more affordable for now, and then you deal with that later. Same thing for any type of medical needs that you might have. Maybe you go ahead and get any type of over-the-counter medicines or prescription medicines. You go ahead and buy those. They could increase in price as well as you go along in a situation that there is recession and inflation. Anything that you may need that you cannot live without, you want to go ahead and try and front load that as much as possible. I know that for a lot of students as well, as you are thinking about with your actual student budget, are there other things that you can do? So maybe you're looking forward to potentially getting a job. You want to kind of go ahead and understand what that looks like now. You know that I've talked a lot about this on my channel about making sure that you are always in line with whatever your visa says. But for a lot of students, you are able to work at least 20 hours a week. And so if you are in that particular boat where your visa says that you can work at least 20 hours a week, maybe you want to just be a little bit more forward thinking and say, hey, I'm not going to study abroad for my full degree for another 4 months, but I already want to. Hey, I'm not going to study abroad for another 4 months for my degree. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and already kind of reach out and see what are the opportunities for international students. So reach out to an advisor at your school or get on some of these message boards out here. I know that this is a way that a lot of students do it. They will get on, let's say, a Gumtree if they are going to the UK, or it could be any place. Reddit obviously is a popular one. Find out what other students are doing to make money, particularly as an international student, where there are limits on how long you can work, limits on what you can often do. But you want to know that so that you can update and get ahead of updating your CV, updating your resume if you need that, or even if it is going to be a situation where you're going to do a walk-on where you're just able to walk into the pub and ask the owner if you can get a job, things like that. You want to have all of that on hand, and you want to kind of know that ahead of time. Again, that's going to help you as you budget in. You can even put a line in your budget for that to just sort of guesstimate and say, like, I definitely want to get a part-time job and hope that I will make between this much, and this will offset this particular amount in my budget. So definitely go ahead and start thinking about that as well as you begin to plan. Last but not least, I definitely did want to put something in here that I think a lot of students miss. Whether you are going for a semester, whether you're going for a full degree abroad, I know that when you're in the student mode and in student mind, you, in a lot of ways, don't need to think about this because you are so lucky that you have your family probably supporting you and you have something to fall back on. But I think that the importance of self-sufficiency is just something that should be more important to students. And so you definitely want to build in a line within your budget for emergencies. And this could be anything. So this could be anything from that's just kind of random, from maybe your luggage got lost on the way to the host country and you're going to have to just deal with whatever you particularly have for the next 4 days until your luggage can make it in that cycle to be brought to you, to something that could be very catastrophic, like you need to come home early because there's a global plague that spread around the world like there did in 2020. So you always want to make sure that you have some emergency money, whether it's actually through like actually having cash on hand. We've talked about that on this channel, or just actually having the ability to make decisions really quickly within your budget to fit an emergency. So it could be that maybe you wake up one day and you're in a student housing building and all the water is shut off for some reason and everyone needs to go to a hotel, but the particular company that owns the building is not going to pay for it. That's a really jerk move, but that has happened before. And so what are you going to do? Maybe you don't have any close friends who live within that particular city that you're in and you don't know anyone there. You're an international student. You just know the people that maybe you're living next to or living with. What are you going to do? If you have money built in for emergencies, and you can figure it out. You can go do an Airbnb, or if you're abroad, you can do the equivalent of that, or get a hotel, get a hostel, something like that. Same thing if there are natural disasters, which of course we can't always predict at all. I know that for a lot of students that I have known in the past, who I've either advised or I've just known who, let's say they come to the US and they go to places like Florida or Texas and they've never had to deal with hurricanes. I can tell you, as someone who grew up in that part of the country, that it is not fun. But at least with that particular type of disaster, you have a little bit of time to plan. Whereas if you are, let's say, going to a place like California or Hawaii, or if you're going to other parts of the world, I know that a lot of countries in Asia deal with this, like earthquakes. Literally, it happens, and when it happens, that's the only time you know that it's happening. But whether it be a natural disaster or whether it just be something where you're going to have to, like the example I gave, wait on your luggage, you want to have bandwidth within your budget for emergencies. And I think that that's something that a lot of students don't often factor in. But I can tell you for a fact that it is very important to have that. Even if you have your parents to fall back on, they may not be able to immediately send you money or whatever. It could just be that it's a time difference of whatever you need action right then. That's why I always say that it's important to have some cash on you so that you can make some decisions. It's also just important to actually have the money available so that you can make decisions. And you want to build that into your budget, despite the fact that you are thinking about recession proofing. That's why I always say that what students should do is after they figure out how much money they actually spend, that you want to sort of bring that down and say, is there a way for me to be able to simplify this within 3 to 5%? If you're able to go to 10%, that's even better. But if you're able to sort of wipe off 3 to 5% of what you currently spend before you even go abroad, that's going to be really helpful. It doesn't mean that, for example, you won't have that money there. Maybe you have savings or maybe you have the support of your family. And so you're going to have the money there. But if you get into that mindset of saying that I'm going to spend 3 to 5% less, let's say, even if it's every week, then that's just more money that you're going to have on hand. And I could just be speaking for myself because I can be a bit of a spender. It's like I'd be like, oh, just going to drop into the store really quickly and grab something for dinner. And then I come out not just with food, but like 2 new outfits every other day. And you may be out there too, or maybe you do online shopping, or maybe you're a gamer and you get into that. Whatever that is, you want to have that little bit fallback money. And of course, as you are going through and focusing on the fact that there is a recession, there is inflation, that you just want to make sure that you have more than less whenever you can. So definitely factor that in to make sure that you are saving money and just putting it away for a rainy day, and just being able to build a budget that's going to be workable for you and definitely livable for you, but also manageable as well and realistic. So I hope this video was helpful for you. I know that particularly for students who are studying abroad for long-term, so for your degree programs, that it can be really stressful to think about doing this within the context of a recession. As you may or may not know, I do have a podcast now, and I've been putting episodes here on YouTube. And so I will link to one that I did where I talked about the fact that I'm still encouraging students to go ahead and move forward if they can at all possible costs, to go ahead and study abroad and get their degrees going despite the recession. As I always say, you can't let external things impact your reality as much as you can. Now, of course, if it is coming down to the wire and you definitely cannot do it, I would say that you need to make other decisions. But I don't want students to feel like they need to just walk away from everything they have planned just because there are external factors that none of us have been in control of that are impacting this. But there are ways to be wise with your money. So that's why I definitely want you to go ahead and download the free budget e-guide. It is going to be very useful for you. I know, even when I had it behind a paywall and students paid for it, they said that it was useful. So I can't imagine now that it is free that it's not going to be useful to you. And just go through it, read through it. And then again, for students who are thinking about their degrees abroad, as I said, make sure that you are mapping out, where all of your money sources are coming from. That's going to be really useful to you as well. So you understand exactly how to build that particular budget with ease and not having to think about, do I know where this scholarship is coming from, this student loan, how does it work? You're going to be able to build that all in easily so that you can make the best budget that is going to be realistic for your time away. Please go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Please like the video. Please share this video with someone that you know who also might be interested in getting their full degree abroad. I release videos every single Friday and sometimes on Wednesdays and Thursdays as well. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.